What if I told you that most advice about cutting expenses is not just wrong, but actually keeps people broke? We're told the solution is simple. Stop buying coffee, cancel Netflix, clip coupons. Small sacrifices, big results. Except somehow millions of people follow this advice religiously and still feel like they're drowning. So where is the money really going? Today's video isn't about lattes or willpower. It's about a hidden system, one that quietly drains finances through habits, structures, and decisions we don't even realize we're making. By the end of this video, you'll understand why traditional budgeting fails, where expense cutting actually breaks down, and how the smartest people reduce spending without feeling deprived. And here's the mystery we're solving. Why do some households slash expenses and thrive, while others cut everything and still collapse? To understand this, we need to rewind. For most of human history, cutting expenses wasn't a strategy, it was survival. Families lived close to the edge. If income dropped, spending had to follow. There were no subscriptions, no lifestyle inflation, no invisible monthly drains. Then came the 20th century. Mass production, consumer credit, and advertising transformed spending from necessity into identity. Buying wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about comfort, status, and belonging. Companies learned how to turn convenience into recurring payments. Banks learned how to smooth pain with debt. And slowly, cutting expenses became framed as a personal failure rather than a structural challenge. By the time modern budgeting advice took shape, it carried a moral undertone. If you're struggling, you must not be disciplined enough. But here's the twist most people miss. The earliest and most powerful expense trap starts with fixed costs. Housing, transportation, insurance, debt payments. These aren't the flashy expenses people talk about, but they quietly dictate everything else. When these costs rise, flexibility disappears. Historically, fixed costs were low and variable. Housing was smaller, transportation was optional, debt was rare. But over time, something changed. Cities expanded, commutes got longer, homes got bigger, cars became mandatory, education became debt-financed. Healthcare became complex. The result? A growing portion of income became locked in before a single choice was made. This is why many people can cut every fun expense and still feel broke. The system already claimed its share. The first cause and effect pattern emerges here. High fixed costs gives reduced adaptability, gives chronic financial stress, and this sets the stage for the next phase. As incomes rise, expenses don't just follow, they often outpace. This is lifestyle inflation. But it's more subtle than buying luxury items. It shows up as slightly better apartments, slightly newer cars, slightly more convenience, slightly less friction. Each upgrade feels justified. Each one feels harmless. Together, they form a financial ceiling. Here's the key mistake. People optimize for comfort before resilience. When life is stable, this works. But stability is an illusion, which brings us to the breaking point. Financial collapse rarely starts with catastrophe. It starts with friction. A car repair, a medical bill, a temporary income dip, a rent increase. On paper, these are manageable. In reality, they expose how tight the system has become. Because when expenses are optimized to the limit, there's no margin. Every dollar already has a job. Every surprise becomes debt. This is the moment people finally try to cut expenses, but now it's too late. They cancel subscriptions, skip vacations, reduce groceries, but fixed costs remain untouched. The system doesn't bend, and that leads to the fallout. Here's the brutal truth most advice avoids. Cutting discretionary spending feels productive, but rarely moves the needle. Why? Because discretionary spending is usually a small percentage of total expenses. And it often provides emotional relief that makes the system tolerable. Remove it, and two things happen. Financial progress is minimal, burnout increases dramatically. This leads to rebound spending, guilt cycles, and eventually, giving up. The cause and effect chain becomes clear. Over-optimized expenses gives low flexibility, gives failed cuts, gives financial exhaustion. So what about solutions? Surely institutions noticed this. They did, and they tried to fix it. The market responded with tools. Apps that track every penny, challenges that gamify saving, extreme frugality movements. But most of these fixes attack symptoms, not causes. Tracking doesn't lower fixed costs. Willpower doesn't restructure systems, and hacks don't change incentives. In some cases, these tools make things worse by reinforcing the idea that failure is personal, not structural. The real fix requires a different way of thinking, which brings us to the modern parallel. Today, the pattern has scaled. Subscription economies. Buy dash now dash pay dash later. Algorithmic pricing. Invisible fees. Expenses are no longer obvious. They're embedded. And the data shows the same repeating cycle: rising fixed costs, shrinking buffers, increased financial anxiety, short-term cuts that fail. The system hasn't changed, just the packaging. But some people do escape the cycle. What do they do differently? Smart expense cutting doesn't start with spending. It starts with structure. The most effective reducers focus on renegotiating or downsizing fixed costs, designing life around flexibility, reducing dependency on mandatory spending. They cut once, not constantly. They don't ask, "What can I stop buying?" They ask, "What forces me to keep buying?" This is the difference between trimming branches and removing roots. 3 takeaways: what actually works. Takeaway number 1, fixed costs matter more than habits. One housing or transportation decision outweighs years of coffee savings. Takeaway number 2, flexibility beats frugality. The goal isn't the lowest spending, it's the highest adaptability. Takeaway number 3, expense cutting is a design problem. If your system requires constant discipline, it's already broken. Here's the warning most people ignore. If your financial plan only works when nothing goes wrong, it will fail. The open question is this: are your expenses designed for a perfect life or a real one? If this video changed how you think about money, hit like. It tells the algorithm this conversation matters. Subscribe if you want more deep cause and effect breakdowns of systems that quietly control our lives. And in the comments, ask yourself and answer honestly: which fixed cost in your life has the most power over your future? Because the smartest way to cut expenses is to cut the ones that control you.